Alexander I reigned as Emperor of Russia from the 23rd of March 1801 to the 1st of December 1825. He was the first Russian king of Poland, reigning from 1815 to 1825, as well as the first Russian Grand Duke of Finland. He was born in St. Petersburg to Grand Duke Paul Petrovich, later Emperor Paul I, and succeeded to the throne after his father was murdered. He ruled Russia during the chaotic period of the Napoleonic Wars. As prince and emperor, Alexander often used liberal rhetoric, but continued Russia's absolutist policies in practice. In the first years of his reign, he initiated some minor social reforms and, in 1803–04, major, liberal educational reforms. He promised constitutional reforms and a desperately needed reform of serfdom in Russia, but made no concrete proposals and nothing happened. In the second half of his reign he was increasingly arbitrary, reactionary and fearful of plots against him. He ended many earlier reforms. He purged schools of foreign teachers, as education became more religiously oriented as well as politically conservative. In foreign policy, he switched Russia back and forth 4 times in 1804 to 1812 from neutral peacemaker to anti-Napoleon to an ally of Napoleon, winding up in 1812 as Napoleon's enemy. In 1805, he joined Britain in the War of the Third Coalition against Napoleon. But after the massive defeat at the Battle of Austerlitz he switched and formed an alliance with Napoleon by the Treaty of Tilsit and joined Napoleon's continental system. He fought a small-scale naval war against Britain, 1807–12. He and Napoleon could never agree, especially about Poland, and the alliance collapsed by 1810. The Tsar's greatest triumph came in 1812 as Napoleon's invasion of Russia proved a total disaster for the French. As part of the winning coalition against Napoleon, he gained some spoils in Finland and Poland. He formed the Holy Alliance to suppress revolutionary movements in Europe that he saw as immoral threats to legitimate Christian monarchs. He helped Austria's Clemens von Metternich in suppressing all national and liberal movements. His reign also saw the conquering and forced cession of what is now Georgia, Dagestan, and much of Azerbaijan from Persia into the Russian Empire. Following the Russo-Persian War and the outcoming Treaty of Gulistan, Alexander died without issue and after great confusion that included the failed Decembrist revolt of liberal army officers. He was succeeded by his younger brother, Nicholas I. Early life. Alexander and his younger brother Constantine were raised by their grandmother, Catherine the Great. Some sources allege that she planned to remove her son Paul I from the succession altogether. From the free-thinking atmosphere of the court of Catherine and his Swiss tutor, Frédéric Sénéchaux de la Harpe, he imbibed the principles of Rousseau's Gospel of Humanity. But from his military governor, Nikolai Saltykov, he imbibed the traditions of Russian autocracy. Andrei Afanasievich Samborsky, whom his grandmother chose for his religious instruction, was an atypical, unbearded Orthodox priest. Samborsky had long lived in England and taught Alexander excellent English, very uncommon for potential Russian autocrats at the time. On 9 October 1793, when Alexander was still 15 years old, he married 14-year-old Louise of Baden, who took the name Elizabeth Alexeyevna. Succession to the throne. The death of Catherine in November 1796, before she could appoint Alexander as her successor, brought his father, Paul I, to the throne. Paul's unpopular policies led to a successful conspiracy to assassinate him. His son, then 23-year-old Alexander, was actually in the palace at the moment of the assassination, to whom General Nicholas Zubov, one of the assassins, announced his accession. Historians still debate Alexander's role in his father's murder. The most common opinion is that he was let into the conspirators' secret and was willing to take the throne but insisted that his father should not be killed. Alexander's having become Tsar through a crime that cost his father's life would give him a strong sense of remorse and shame. Alexander I succeeded to the throne on 24 March 1801, and was crowned in the Kremlin on 15 September of that year. Domestic policy. At first, the Orthodox Church exercised little influence on Alexander's life. The young Tsar was determined to reform the inefficient, highly centralized systems of government that Russia relied upon, while retaining for a time the old ministers. One of the first acts of his reign was to appoint the private committee, comprising young and enthusiastic friends of his own, Viktor Kochubey, Nikolai Novoseltsev, Pavel Stroganov and Adam Jerzy Czartoryski, to draw up a plan of domestic reform, which was supposed to result in the establishment of a constitutional monarchy in accordance with the teachings of the Age of Enlightenment. In a few years the liberal Mikhail Speransky became one of the Tsar's closest advisors, and drew up many plans for elaborate reforms. By the government reform of Alexander I, the old collegia were abolished and new ministries created in their place, having at their head ministers responsible to the crown. A council of ministers under the chairmanship of the sovereign dealt with all interdepartmental matters. The State Council was created in order to improve technique of legislation. It was intended to become the second chamber of representative legislature. The governing Senate was reorganized as the Supreme Court of the Empire. The codification of the laws initiated in 1801 was never carried out during his reign. Alexander wanted to resolve another crucial issue in Russia, the status of the serfs, although this was not achieved until 1861. His advisers quietly discussed the options at length. Cautiously, he extended the right to own land to most classes of subjects, including state-owned peasants, in 1801, and created a new social category of free agriculturalist, for peasants voluntarily emancipated by their masters, in 1803. The great majority of serfs were not affected. When Alexander's reign began, there were 3 universities in Russia, at Moscow, Vilna, and Dorpat. These were strengthened, and 3 others were founded at St. Petersburg, Kharkov, and Kazan. Literary and scientific bodies were established or encouraged, and the reign became noted for the aid lent to the sciences and arts by the emperor and the wealthy nobility. Alexander later expelled foreign scholars. After 1815, the military settlements were introduced, with the idea of making the army, or part of it, self-supporting economically and for providing it with recruits.